Mr. Newby here, and today, before we can get into wood joints, we need to talk a little bit about a piece of wood, a piece of solid wood to be exact, okay? Because we're going to be using terminology and different names for different parts of this board, and you need to know what I'm talking about so that we don't make mistakes, you don't have injuries. So let's talk about a piece of wood, a piece of solid wood. First of all, how many sides or parts does a piece of wood have? Any ideas? 6. A lot of you probably said 4, because that's the most common wrong answer. 6. We have these two. This one and this one. Okay? These are the flat surfaces. Then we have these two. This one here and this one here. Those are called the edges. Okay? So we have two surfaces and two edges, and then we have these. This is called the ends. Okay, so we have an in there and an in there. So let's review it. Two surfaces, two edges, two ends. Okay, now go back to the surfaces. The best surface we call the face. That may be the one that we want to see. It's going to be the outside of our project because we're not going to see the inside as much as the outside. So we want it to be the best side. So you want to pick the best surface to be your face. Okay, and then we process that piece of wood through the machinery with the face up for most instances so that we keep that on the outside. That'll be the outside of our project. Okay, so again, two surfaces, that one and that one. The best one being the face. So let's talk about wood grain real quick. See the wood grain in this board? Grain's going this way. If I can put it down here, okay, so you can see the grain. Grain's going this way. And that's important to understand because the edge of your board always goes with the grain. The end of the board is where the grain ends. Where the grain stops, that is end grain. Okay? So, good to know. Two surfaces, the best one being the face. Two edges, the edges go with the grain. Two ends, and that's where the grain of the wood ends. All right. So let's talk about a little bit more about a piece of wood. Let's talk about thickness. Usually if I ask a student, how thick is this board? They'll say, I don't know. No, they'll know that I'm talking about this, okay, how thick this is. So if you're going to measure that thickness, you could measure it like that. Okay, how thick is that board? Let me turn around to the end. Okay, how thick is that board? So most students get that. That's pretty straightforward. But when I ask them what's the width or the length, they confuse those a lot because they think the length is the longest part of the board. And a lot of times that is true. But in woodworking, length goes with the grain. So if I ask you how long this board is, you have to see the grain and then you'll measure the length of the board. Okay? So if I ask you how wide is this board, okay, turn it around here. If I ask you how wide this board is, you would measure across the grain. Okay, see the grain there? You'd measure across it. Okay, so let's review again. We have two surfaces. The best surface is called the face. We have two edges. How do we know these are the edges? Because they go with the grain. Then we have two ends. How do we know these are the ends? Because the grain ends there. Okay, end grain is very important to know. Okay, so then we talked about thickness. Thickness, how thick it is. We can measure that thickness this way. We talked about the width of a board. That is across the grain. So when you measure across the grain, that is your width. And then your length, how long a board is, has to do with grain direction. So let me explain that another way. If I went and cut a 2-inch piece of this wood off, cut it across here at 2 inches, and asked you how long the board is, a lot of you would measure the long part. But the grain, that's a cross grain, so that would actually be the width. You would have to measure with the grain and tell me that the length is 2 inches, where the width would have been more like 6 inches. Okay, so it's kind of confusing, but not really. You'll get it. Just need to understand that. A little bit more terminology with a piece of wood. Okay, if I say you're going to rip the board, you need to rip your board to width. Ripping is cutting with the grain. Okay, so if we're cutting with the grain in this direction, that is ripping. We do that on the table saw, and the table saw is used to rip the board to width. If we want to cut to length, okay, we use the miter saw. The miter saw is used to cross cut. So ripping goes with the grain, cross cutting goes across the grain. We rip to width, we cross cut to get our length. Good words to remember, ripping and cross cutting. What's the difference? We make another common cut in here. That's a cut at an angle on the board. So if I took this board, I want to do a 45-degree angle across it. I would also do that on the miter saw. And any angle cut is called a miter, hence the name miter saw. We also use the miter saw a lot for squaring. We talked about squaring when we talked about the framing square and the tri-square and the other squares. We want them 90 degrees. We can set the miter saw to 0, which will give us a 0-degree cut, square cut. But if we cut at an angle, that is called a miter. So, a lot of terminology right there. Let's review it all. Okay? Board has 6 sides, 2 surfaces. This is the surface, and this is a surface. The best surface, which on this board is probably this one, would be considered the face. We want the face to be the outside of a project, the part that is seen. Then we have 2 edges. The edges go with the grain. That is the edge of the board. Okay, the edge of the board goes with the grain. The end of the board, this is the end of the board, is where the grain goes and stops or ends. Okay, so 2 surfaces, the best one being a face, 2 edges, and 2 ends. All right, now thickness of the board, pretty easy. Measure it like width of the board, across the grain. Make sure measurement is across the grain for width. And then length of the board is with the grain to get your length. Okay? And then if we cut with the grain, it is called ripping. We do that on a table saw. We rip, it changes the width of the board. If we cut across the grain, that is called cross-cutting. Okay? Cross-cutting changes the length of your board. Okay? If we cut at an angle, that is called mitering. Okay? So any angle is a miter. Alright, so that's some terminology you need to know as we get into wood joints, to know what the difference between the end and the edge and the surface of a board is, to know the thickness, the width, and the length of a board, and some terminology we'll get into about cutting this way, which is called ripping. This way is cross-cutting. At an angle is a miter. Alright, so that's the basics of a piece of wood, and this will lead into the next videos that'll have to do with wood joints. Wood joints are how wood is put together. So with that said, newbie out.